welcome to the Shieldwall. My name is Brad. Thank you for joining me. This is my Imperium Magazine Build, Paint, Play Review Series, Issue 1, Episode 1. This series is intended to methodically follow the steps included in Imperium Magazine with the miniatures included in Imperium Magazine. Each issue will be broken down into smaller videos. In this episode, we will be building the Primaris Lieutenant that comes in Issue 1. In Episode 2, I will build the Necron Royal Warden included in Issue 1, and in Episode 3, I will demonstrate the mission playthrough included in Issue 1. I will be your host, your guide, your builder, your painter. I have been building and painting models since the 90s, because I'm old, but for this series I will use the models, steps, techniques, and paints that Imperium Magazine recommends in the order they recommend them. We start by setting out the sprues and the bases, both included in Issue 1. You see this combo sprue has included on it both the Necron Royal Warden and the Primaris Lieutenant. This episode we're going to be focusing just on building the Primaris Lieutenant, who's included on that sprue by himself. We start by grabbing our sprue cutters, our nippers, and we start taking the pieces off of the sprue. When you're cutting pieces off of a sprue, as the instructions say that come with the Imperium Magazine, you want to make sure that the flat side of the sprue cutter is as close to the piece that you're cutting as possible. This eliminates the extra plastic being attached to the piece that you're cutting off. As you can see, I've started with parts number 1, 2, and 3, I believe. This is a small sub-assembly that consists of the torso, legs, and head. Once you get the pieces removed from the sprue, you're going to want to take a hobby knife and file down any mold lines remaining on the piece and any excess plastic on the sprue connection points. Now, when you're using a hobby knife, X-Acto knife, whatever you got, that's a razor blade. It's sharp. You're going to want to be careful in how you move the razor blade. You don't want to cut yourself. So you can see how I'm holding the X-Acto knife. I'm holding it clenched in my fingers, and when I draw the blade across the piece, I'm moving my fingers towards my thumb. I'm not actually cutting with the knife. I'm just squeezing my fingers, which slides the blade, as you can see here. That way the blade won't move. I'm not putting pressure on the blade, I'm just sliding the blade. It won't move any further than my fingers will. So this is extra sprue connection plastic. Oh, well, for those of you keeping track at home, that's the first time I've dropped a miniature. And we remove the extra mold lines. Plastic miniatures now are much better than they used to be. The mold lines are much less obnoxious than in the past. But you go through all the pieces and ensure that the mold lines and plastic connection bits have been removed. On a push fit model like this, you can tell it's a push fit because of those posts. They can be assembled without glue. It's been designed that way. But you're going to want to be careful when you're trimming extra plastic around the posts that you don't deform the post at all. Because if the post gets enlarged or bent or deformed in any way, it's not going to want to fit into the slot where it's supposed to go. This causes the model to not want to fit together, and then you're going to have to trim up the post. So for this one I'm using plastic glue. This is the plastic glue that was provided with IMPERIUM Magazine. You can use the needle applicator to squirt glue directly onto the miniature, or like I've done here, you can squirt out some plastic glue and then use the needle applicator or a toothpick and apply the plastic glue to the miniature. That might give you some extra control. So here I have the back of the miniature and the head. If you examine the neck post and the back of the miniature, you can see that there's a slot so that the head is pointed in the correct direction. Now, if you wanted to have the head pointed in a different direction, you would just remove the post and glue the head directly to the concave indentation in the bottom of the neck. Now you want to add glue to the edges of the torso. The good thing about using plastic glue is that it bonds plastic to plastic, so it will help seal the gaps in the miniature so he doesn't have a big hole in the side of his chest armor. Now with these push fit miniatures, sometimes they take some squeezing to get them right. Make sure when you apply pressure, you're not applying the pressure on a delicate fiddly bit. You don't want the bit to bend or break off. It looks good. We go back to the sprue, start removing other pieces. This Primaris Lieutenant is a fairly simple model to put together. It's a complicated model detail-wise, but assembly is fairly simple. He has an open stance. He has a shield in one hand, a sword or a pistol in the other hand. You don't have to worry about lining up both arms on a gun or anything of that nature. He's pretty straightforward. Just follow the instructions included with IMPERIUM Magazine. The Royal Warden coming up in the next episode is a little bit more complicated. Now when it comes to mold line and sprue connection point removal, you can do as much or as little of this as you want. If you're a beginner and you're concerned about damaging the model or something of that nature, the pieces that you really want to look out for are the sprue connection points that are going to interfere with the assembly of the model. I don't remember if there are that many on this miniature, but sometimes the way the miniature will be laid out on the sprue connection points, if you don't get that shaved flat, it will stop two pieces from sitting flat against each other. This can result in gaps in the miniature or other bad stuff happening. But most of these that I'm removing now would not interfere with construction. They're just for looks. For some reason, Games Workshop loves to put sprue connectors on the coolant vents on the backpack. This is a spot that's easily seen from the top of the miniature, from a table down, standing above a table looking down at the miniature. Really irritating. If you can, you want to give them a scrape. We've got all our pieces clipped and cleaned. Let's start putting them on our Primaris Lieutenant. And as you can see, this is a push fit, so the arm goes on fairly well without using any glue. IMPERIUM Magazine recommends that you fully assemble this miniature before you start painting. That's fine. You can put it together fully if you start painting, before you start painting. You can also put it together in sub-assemblies, meaning leave the shield arm off and then paint the Marine without his shield arm on. If you're a first-time painter, this might make it a little bit easier to get to the miniature to paint it. Either way is fine. Now that we've got him fully assembled, we check, make sure everything looks great, everything looks fine, and now we'll test fit him to the base. With single pose Marines like this, they often have very dynamic poses. He takes up a lot of space, so you're going to want to make sure that he is seated correctly on the base. His stance, his feet are very wide apart, so you don't want one foot falling off the edge of the base. We've got his poor little necron skull. We'll fit that onto the base and then put the lieutenant back on. As far as gluing, having a post going into the base will hold the miniature on, but oftentimes the other foot will kind of flap around. So I would recommend putting some glue on the bottom of that other foot to glue. So there we have it. A fully assembled Primaris Lieutenant, ready to lead his Space Marine forces into glorious battle in the name of the Primarch and the immortal Emperor of mankind. Make sure to check out episode 2, where we build the ancient and inscrutable Necron Royal Warden, so that your toy soldier has an enemy to fight, of course. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Please make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, do all the YouTube things, so that you won't miss the next episode. Thanks again for watching, and don't hesitate to leave a comment below if you have any questions about the build. Until next time.